Are you ready to hear the truth about what lies beneath the Sphinx? For decades, scientists have been detecting strange cavities under the Giza Plateau. Ground-penetrating radars show empty spaces, some of them dozens of meters deep. Official reports exist, but most of the data is either inaccessible or gone. So what are these structures? Natural formations? Or something made by human hands a very long time ago? Several international teams worked on the site. All of them left without finishing their research. Why? No official explanation. Egyptian authorities acknowledge the cavities exist, but they won't allow public access, and they've offered no clear reason why. At the same time, one legend keeps resurfacing. A hidden library, a vault of knowledge buried in the sand, possibly created by a civilization older than Egypt itself. The legend says the Sphinx was built to guard it, not just to look impressive, but to hide what's underneath. Many believe it's just a myth, but the scans are real, the location is real, and the silence surrounding it is very real. In this video, we'll look at the facts, the reports, and the gaps between them. We're not here to tell stories. We're here to ask the questions no one wants to answer, and maybe find something no one was supposed to see. What if I told you we still don't know who built the Sphinx? You've seen it 100 times. In photos, documentaries, video games, ads. It's one of the most iconic monuments on the planet. But here's the strange part. For such a famous structure, we actually know very little about it. Who built it? When? And why? Even Egyptologists don't fully agree. The mainstream theory says the Sphinx was built around 2500 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, that it was carved from a single block of limestone, and that the face represents Khafre himself. Sounds clear, right? But here's the problem. There's no actual evidence, no inscription, no ancient text, not a single record that directly links the Sphinx to Khafre. It's just a theory based on location and assumption. And there's more. The body of the Sphinx shows clear signs of erosion, but not just from wind or sand, from water. Heavy, long-term water damage. That raises a big question. When was the last time it rained heavily in Giza? Geologists say more than 7,000 years ago, maybe even 10,000. So if the erosion is from rain, could the Sphinx be way older than we think? Now look at the proportions. The body is massive, but the head is oddly small. Some researchers believe the head was recarved, that it once looked completely different, and someone much later reshaped it. There's another detail. The head is much better preserved than the rest of the body. Why? Because it was restored? Or because it's newer? In other words, we might not be looking at one monument, but two different time periods fused together. And here's the key point. If we're not even sure when or why the Sphinx was built, what else about it is uncertain? What if the real story isn't just about the statue above ground, but what might be hidden underneath? What if there's a reason we're not allowed to explore under the Sphinx? For years, there's been talk of a hidden chamber beneath the monument. Some call it the Hall of Records, a lost library sealed in stone. The legend says it holds ancient knowledge, writings, maps, objects, things left behind by a forgotten civilization. Not Egyptian, older, maybe much older. But where does this idea even come from? It became popular in the 20th century, mostly thanks to one man, Edgar Cayce, an American mystic nicknamed the Sleeping Prophet, who gave thousands of trance readings. In several of them, he claimed that survivors of Atlantis had hidden a library of advanced knowledge somewhere in Egypt, and more specifically under the Sphinx. He said it would be discovered when the time is right, and that it would change the world. Sounds like science fiction, and maybe it is. But here's where it gets interesting. In the 1990s, scientific teams from Japan and the US scanned the Giza Plateau. They used ground-penetrating radar and seismic methods. The goal was simple: detect voids beneath the surface. What they found raised eyebrows. The scans showed cavities and unexplained hollows, right near the paws of the Sphinx, the exact area Casey had mentioned. These findings were published, peer-reviewed. Even Egypt's own Supreme Council of Antiquities confirmed the anomalies existed. But when foreign teams asked for permission to investigate further, they were denied. Repeatedly, Egyptian authorities acknowledged the data. They admitted that certain subsurface features were present, but access was blocked. No full-scale excavation, no detailed public report. Why? That's where things get murky. There's no official reason. Some say the ground is unstable. Others say the area is too sensitive. But sensitive how? This isn't just about a legend anymore. The scans are real. The locations are real. And the refusal to investigate? Also real. Now here's another piece of the puzzle. In 1993, an independent researcher named John Anthony West, along with geologist Robert Schoch, proposed that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx pointed to extreme water damage, meaning the structure might be thousands of years older than we think. And that lined up with Casey's claims. So let's put the pieces together. Casey makes a wild claim in the 1930s. Decades later, teams find actual cavities in the same place. Those findings are confirmed, but no one is allowed to go further. And geological evidence suggests the monument itself might predate Egypt. Coincidence? Or something more? We're not saying the Hall of Records exists, but the evidence isn't just coming from myths. It's coming from radar data, physical erosion, and institutional silence. That's why the story won't go away, because no one's been allowed to answer the question that matters most. What's under the Sphinx? Here's something no one talks about. There isn't a single inscription on the Sphinx that says who built it. Not one. No name. No signature. Nothing. In ancient Egypt, even the smallest statues were labeled. But this, the biggest and most iconic monument, completely anonymous. Almost like someone didn't want us to know where it came from. Here's the part most people never hear about. The ground under the Sphinx has already been scanned, more than once, and the results were never fully explained. In the early 1990s, a Japanese team from Waseda University used ground-penetrating radar around the base of the Sphinx. They weren't looking for legends, just geological data. But what they found was strange. Under the front paws, they detected a rectangular cavity, about 2 by 3 meters, too symmetrical to be natural, just a few meters beneath the surface. Then, near the tail of the Sphinx, more anomalies, vertical and horizontal voids where the bedrock should be solid, some of them connecting in unnatural ways. A few years later, an American team led by geophysicist Thomas DeBecke and geologist Robert Schoch ran their own scans. They got similar results, unusual echoes, deep acoustic reflections. They weren't guessing. They had data, and the data showed cavities, multiple ones. Long, narrow, empty spaces under and around the Sphinx. These weren't rumors. They were presented in scientific papers, peer-reviewed, documented. Even Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities confirmed the anomalies existed. But when foreign researchers requested permission to excavate, the answer was no. Not once, multiple times. Access denied. No digging. No exploration. No explanation. Why? Officials said it was for safety reasons. That the structure is too fragile. That opening the cavities could cause damage. Maybe that's true. But here's the strange thing. The same authorities allowed large-scale restoration work on the outside of the Sphinx. Heavy equipment, workers hammering stone, scaffolding around the monument. So why is scanning fine, restoration fine, but careful digging under supervision off limits? That's where the questions begin. Because these scans, they didn't just detect something. They showed multiple voids, lined up in precise places, in ways that don't match natural formations. And those locations, they line up almost exactly with what Casey described 60 years earlier. That's not proof, but it's hard to ignore. To this day, there's never been a full-scale, independent excavation under the Sphinx. Not by international teams, not by neutral observers, only limited research under tight control. And despite all the technology we have now, no updated scans have been made public in over 20 years. That's what makes this more than just a mystery. It's a black box. We know what's there. We just can't see it. And if there's nothing important down there, why is it still off limits? Why are the maps still classified? Why does no one get to check? The Sphinx might be mysterious, but it's not unique. Across Egypt, there's something few tourists ever see. Massive underground networks. Tunnels, shafts, chambers, hidden right beneath the surface. And here's the thing, they're not myths. They're documented, excavated, and in many cases closed off. Let's start with one of the most dramatic examples, the Serapeum of Saqqara. It's a massive underground complex near the step pyramid of Djoser. Dozens of chambers, carved into solid bedrock. Inside, 24 giant granite boxes, each weighing over 70 tons. No one knows how they got there, or why they were sealed in perfect symmetry. Next, Dendra. Beneath the Temple of Hathor, there are multiple underground passageways. Narrow, steep, and lined with hieroglyphs. Some of them were only discovered in the 1990s. Others have never been open to the public. Now move to Luxor. Under the Temple of Ammonius, there are documented shafts, going deep underground with branching corridors. Archaeologists have explored parts of them, but large sections remain off-limits. In the necropolis of Abu Sur, satellite images have revealed outlines of tunnels beneath the sand, forming grids that resemble streets. And some go deep, 20 meters, 30 meters, entire floors beneath the visible ruins. Here's what's important. These aren't theories. They're all officially cataloged in archaeological records. But for some reason, most visitors never hear about them, and access is limited even for researchers. Why? Some say it's to protect the sites. Others believe the full extent of Egypt's underground world is still being mapped. But the result is the same, a massive part of history out of view. Now bring this back to the Sphinx. If Egypt is filled with underground structures, from Saqqara to Dendra to Luxor, why is the idea of something under the Sphinx considered fringe? Why should the most iconic monument in Egypt be the only one without a substructure? And there's more. Back in the 1800s, British and French explorers drew maps of Giza. Some showed tunnels leading toward the Sphinx. Later, Egyptian archaeologists sealed many of those shafts, citing safety concerns. And to this day, several old entrances near the Sphinx remain blocked or covered. Even Zahi Hawass, Egypt's most famous archaeologist, once admitted there are tunnels near the Sphinx that lead nowhere. But photos show clear drops, vertical shafts going deep underground. So if underground chambers are common across Egypt, and if even the Sphinx has signs of sealed openings, then the real question becomes, what was this underground system used for? Storage? Rituals? Something else entirely? We might never know the full answer. But one thing is clear. The ground beneath Egypt holds more than sand and stone. And the Sphinx, whether we're allowed to see it or not, is part of that network. And now, one forgotten episode. In the 1800s, British explorers photographed something strange behind the Sphinx. A narrow vertical shaft, cut directly into the bedrock. One photo shows a man standing inside it, waist deep in the hole. No one knew where it led. There were no inscriptions, no records, just an opening and silence. Then, sometime in the 20th century, it was sealed. Stone blocks were placed over the top. Today, there's no sign of it left. No official report. No public statement. Nothing. The only proof it ever existed are the old photographs. That shaft, one of the few known vertical entrances near the Sphinx, is now gone, sealed, erased, forgotten, just like everything else buried under the sand. Let's ask the real question. Why would anyone carve a secret chamber beneath the Sphinx and then leave it empty? Because that's the heart of the mystery. It's not about whether there's a void. The scans already confirmed that. The real question is, what was placed there? Let's break down the possibilities. First, the idea of a lost archive, a hidden library, not just Egyptian scrolls, but records from a civilization that came before. Sounds far-fetched, until you realize that ancient Egypt itself spoke of earlier ages. Of Zep-Tepi, the first time, when gods walked the earth and knowledge was passed to man. Some researchers believe the chamber could contain writings from that time, or artifacts, things that would rewrite history. If that's true, it wouldn't just be an archaeological discovery. It would change everything we know about human civilization. Now let's consider another theory, a ritual chamber. The Sphinx faces due east, aligned with the rising sun on the spring equinox. That's not accidental. It's astronomical. In ancient cultures, such alignments were sacred. They marked beginnings, endings, transitions. Maybe the chamber below wasn't built for storage. Maybe it was built for something else entirely, a place of ceremony or initiation. Some believe high priests entered it during key celestial events, that it was used in rites the public was never meant to see. And there's a third possibility. What if the chamber wasn't built by the Egyptians at all? Geologists like Robert Schoch have argued that the body of the Sphinx shows signs of water erosion, severe, long-term damage caused by heavy rainfall. But Giza hasn't seen that kind of rain in over 7,000 years. If that's true, the Sphinx and anything beneath it could predate Egyptian civilization entirely. Maybe the pharaohs didn't build the chamber. Maybe they found it and simply built their kingdom around it. That would explain the lack of inscriptions, the silence in the records, the mystery. But here's where things get uncomfortable. If something is buried there, who would get to open it? And who would decide what to tell the world? The Egyptian government has refused outside access for decades. No international team has been allowed to excavate under the Sphinx, even though scans show something is there. So let's imagine the impossible happens. They open the chamber, and inside is something unexpected. A scroll, a relic, a device, something that doesn't fit the timeline, something that raises more questions than answers. What happens next? Would the world be told? Or would the chamber be sealed again, and the contents disappear? This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a real problem in archaeology, the control of discovery. And when it comes to the Sphinx, the most protected monument in Egypt, that control is absolute. So maybe the question isn't just, what was buried beneath? Maybe it's this: are we even allowed to find out? Not all discoveries are hidden because they're dangerous. Some are hidden because they're inconvenient. And in archaeology, inconvenient often means invisible. Let's be clear. To dig in Egypt, you need permission. Not just a permit, but approval from the Supreme Council of Antiquities. Without it, nothing happens. And permissions aren't just about science. They're about politics and control. Throughout the 1990s, several research teams tried to access the areas beneath the Sphinx. They had data, they had funding, they had ground-penetrating radar that showed clear anomalies. But when they requested excavation rights, the answer was no. Again and again. Sometimes there was no reply. Sometimes the project was paused. Sometimes the permit was approved, but the location changed last minute. In one case, American researchers were granted access to an area near the Sphinx. But once on site, they were told the exact coordinates were off-limits. So they left. What happened next? The data disappeared from the public eye. The research teams disbanded. And no one dug. This isn't theory. It's documented. Now let's talk about the academic world. In archaeology, reputation is everything. If your findings challenge the accepted timeline, you're labeled a fringe theorist. Your papers get rejected. Your funding dries up. So most professionals don't ask the hard questions. They publish what's expected. They avoid controversy, not because they're dishonest, but because the system rewards silence. It rewards safe narratives and punishes anything that shakes the foundation. The Sphinx is a perfect example. It's not just a monument. It's a symbol of Egyptian heritage, of national identity, of ancient power. Admitting that something unknown might lie beneath it, that opens the door to chaos. Who built it? When? Why is there no record? Each question leads to more uncertainty, and uncertainty is bad for institutions. So instead, the official story stays the same. No chambers, no discoveries, nothing unusual. And if something is found, sealed, delayed, or quietly dismissed, this doesn't mean there's a grand conspiracy, but it does mean that access is controlled, and curiosity has limits. In 1993, a geophysical report showed a rectangular void in front of the Sphinx. It was published briefly and then removed. No follow-up, no excavation, no explanation. In the early 2000s, Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities said there were no plans to explore beneath the monument. And today, there still aren't. We're told the Sphinx has been fully studied, that there's nothing to find, that the rumors are false. But how can we be sure if no one is allowed to check? The mystery beneath the Sphinx may not be physical. It may not be a chamber or a relic. The real mystery might be the silence, because sometimes the most protected thing in archaeology isn't what's buried, it's who decides what's revealed. They spoke about tunnels beneath the Sphinx, about shafts they had seen with their own eyes. They were invited on television, shown once. After that, no interviews, no replays, as if they vanished. Along with the story they told, in the early 1990s, restoration crews worked around the Sphinx. Stone repair, drainage, sand control. But some footage from those projects shows more than just surface work. In one shot, a worker is seen lowering equipment into a vertical shaft behind the monument. In another, there's a close-up of a rectangular hole near the Sphinx's ribs, a hole that no longer exists today. Some of these images aired on national TV in Egypt and Europe. Others were part of early documentaries. None of them are shown today, and when researchers asked to revisit the locations, they were told the shafts had been filled for safety reasons. No explanation, no access. John Anthony West, one of the first to question the official age of the Sphinx, once said in an interview, "We saw things we weren't supposed to. Then the cameras stopped rolling." He and geologist Robert Schoch were the ones who proposed the Sphinx might be thousands of years older than believed, based on water erosion. They filmed near the pause. They explored old cavities. They tried to gain excavation rights. They were denied. After that, the funding stopped. And West, once praised on TV, was quietly excluded from official tours. Another case involves workers hired during off-season site maintenance. One man, who asked not to be named, told a journalist, "There was a staircase. It went down. I don't know where. They made us take everything apart. And we were told not to speak to anyone." His testimony was never followed up. He disappeared from the conversation. So what's going on here? Multiple people claim to have seen entrances, shallow shafts, even corridors. Some were filmed. Some were photographed. Some were only mentioned in passing, before being shut down. No one officially disproved them. They were simply ignored. Because in the world of monuments like the Sphinx, you don't need to erase the truth. You just have to stop the camera And it's not just workers or researchers. Even former security guards at Giza have spoken anonymously. One reportedly said, "Sometimes we saw lights underground. Teams would come in at night. Foreigners. We weren't allowed near them." Another said, "I once saw people going down through the ground, behind the Sphinx, but we were told to leave." Of course, these accounts are hard to verify, but that's the point. No one tries to verify them. No one investigates. No one is allowed to, because once a witness is dismissed, their story is no longer a fact. It's a rumor, and rumors are easy to bury. But there's one thing harder to erase than evidence: the human memory. And the more stories pile up, the harder it becomes to believe they're all just mistakes. Maybe not all of them were right, but maybe one of them was. Maybe someone really did see what we're not supposed to. And maybe the only reason we still don't know is because they were never allowed to say more. When the camera shuts off, truth doesn't disappear. It just waits for the next person brave enough to speak. What if we've already found everything we need and just don't want to accept it? Let's stop chasing answers for a moment and look at what we know. There is a chamber beneath the Sphinx. That's not speculation, it's data. Multiple scans confirm anomalies under and around the monument. Geophysical readings show voids, rectangular ones, precisely shaped. Some of these areas were accessed, then sealed. Others were photographed, then disappeared. Old shafts shown in the 1990s? Gone. Eyewitnesses, from engineers to guards, spoke about tunnels, ladders, underground spaces. Some were interviewed once and never again. Some gave testimony and vanished from the record. No one disproved them. They were just forgotten. Then there's the erosion on the body of the Sphinx. It points to a time when heavy rainfall shaped the plateau. Rainfall that hasn't touched Giza in over 7,000 years. That alone should be a headline, but it's not. Why? Because headlines require approval. Access requires permission, and the Sphinx is protected, not just by stone, but by systems. Permission to dig? Denied. Requests to scan? Blocked. Questions that go too far? Silenced. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how the world works. When history becomes a matter of control, academic institutions avoid risk. Governments protect narratives. And science gets stuck between the two. But here's what's real. We've seen enough, not to solve the mystery, but to prove that one exists. That's the difference. We're not claiming there's a lost city under the Sphinx. We're not saying there's treasure or a tomb or a machine. We're saying there's silence. And that silence is loud. When you combine radar scans, eyewitness accounts, secrecy, denials, and vanishing footage, you're not building a theory. You're exposing a pattern. Pattern of avoidance, of control, of fear. And maybe that's more important than any discovery. Because if the truth is being delayed, we have to ask, who benefits from the delay? If something ancient and unexpected really lies beneath the Sphinx, why would it be dangerous to admit? What changes? History books? Religions? Tourism? Or just our sense of certainty? Sometimes, a single unanswered question can threaten an entire worldview. And maybe that's why the answers haven't come. Because the questions are finally being asked, out loud. Maybe the real story isn't buried in stone. Maybe it's right here, in the silence between facts, in the stories that weren't told, in the photos that were pulled, in the voices we no longer hear. Truth doesn't always explode into view. Sometimes it builds, slowly, relentlessly, until the silence breaks. And when it does, we'll have to decide what to do with it. The mystery is real. The silence is louder than ever. And maybe that says everything we need to know.